3d6 down the line.
Okay, that is episode 72 in the books. Well done, guys. Very fun session.
Great.
That was kind of
I just lived.
Yeah, hot ending there. Hot ending.
Yeah.
Very hot.
Yeah, we were just discussing off camera that both Ted and Matt, they were 1 hit point away from dropping each of them.
Each had one.
So it was lucky rolls on my part for you. You know.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad I didn't get poisoned. That would have been too much.
Yeah,
that would have been a tough choice there at the end because she only has it once.
And it only affects one person.
Yep, it is a touch spell. It works on one person.
We'd have had to use it on Wolford. Titus is not beloved.
Wolford has so much personality. Titus, like Ted, he's just kind of not kidding. I love you, you adorable bastard.
Thanks to Titus not dropping, he was able to actually put his mark on the campaign already with the use of the Wand of Lightning. So
that was pretty awesome,
dude. Yeah. I loved that. I'm so thankful that you took it.
Yeah.
Right. Like a good thing we discussed a little bit of bookkeeping before we crossed that chasm, man.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had just been sitting on it, that would have been it, dude. Like.
It's also a cool illustration of a half elf being able to use magic user items, but not actually able to cast spells at first level. You know what I mean? That also was very, very good for you.
Well, that's what actually made me say, "Oh, I should grab it." I mean, I wanted it anyway because it was cool. But then I happened to look at my character sheet and I saw the line that says, "Use items as arcane spellcaster," and I was like, "Oh, light bulb! Let's grab that one." So. Yeah, I'm very happy. That's cool.
Good thinking. Good. It was just good luck all around.
Yeah.
Lots of good. Go ahead, Ted.
No, I was just gonna say that was a lot of fun, and it was a really interesting set of rooms, and so you said we were going to talk about this because Matt mentioned it briefly during a break. Do you want to go ahead and talk about the rooms, Matt?
Oh, the architecture. Yeah. So one thing that really struck me, and I thought it was very cool, was the fact that room with the ghouls and the white in it was at this particular angle that followed exactly the angle of the chasm, which indicates that section of the halls was built after that chasm happened. Right. Yeah. So there's all of this, history built in and reflected by the architecture. And I thought that was really cool. There's only one reason why that room would be off at that angle, which is to parallel and act build in response to that natural environment. So it's really cool to see like the natural history reflected in this part of the dungeon.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in fact, this didn't occur to me until you just said that right now. But I'm bringing Mira back up. There's like a trapezoidal room right to the maybe not. Never mind. It always struck me as strange that the what I would call like a skewed rectangle right by the Misty Pool room.
Oh yeah,
was shaped like that, and I keep wanting to like fill the gap in my mind for some reason, other than it just being like a bunch of impossible shapes in that region, which are kind of like kooky math. But it probably doesn't actually correlate with the chasm. No, so I redact that. It was further away than I remembered. But
there are rooms that predate the chasm because the chasm seems to cut through them. And then there are rooms that postdate the chasm, like this one, which says a lot about the whole complex. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't know if we're ever going to figure this out, without reading the module someday. Which
we got this.
We do, everybody. but it's a lot of fun to try and work it out.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was going to say, like, when you started pointing that out, because there are a couple of rooms north of here, the shrine where Av is building the shrine to Lysion, right, is one of those rooms that is cut off by the chasm. And it really looks like if you look at this map, there does seem to be a dividing line between the older stuff and the newer stuff that happens. My theory is off of that hallway, but between the magic mouths, that hallway where the barricade that leads to the barricaded room.
Yeah.
My my theory with no proof is that that's kind of the dividing line between the old stuff, which is north, which was affected by the chasm, and then the new architecture, which was done to the south of that, where the beastmen are and all of that stuff. Anyway,
Well,
that's just a theory, right?
Like any
No,
big
I think
church or like the Vatican, right? You know, I mean, the original structure at St. Peter's is long gone, right?
Yeah.
But they grow over time and they add on a new church or a new building or a library or what have you. What were you going to say, David?
I was just agreeing, essentially. Yeah, no, I think you're right, Matt. I think again, I'm always like looking for themes or like visual notes, whether they're conscious or subconscious on the designer's part. And yeah, I mean that's a very clean delineation, and also just like southward, they're fairly traditional layouts, right? And then immediately you go north of that, and you have a bunch of like surreal shapes that don't fit in the space at all, right? They don't even seem to exist within the logic of a cavern, I would say, right? Like, it's as if they didn't. This is not me like coming up with a theory, but like figuratively speaking, it's as if they were just teleported right there, right? It's not cohesive with the environment in any way as a shape language in my mind, either natural or architectural, which is really interesting because what does that say then about who architected those halls? Yeah, I think you're right, Matt. It's interesting.
We did sort of touch on this on a couple episodes ago when you were looking at those rooms, that the three which you've determined are the mysteries of Thoth seem to correspond to exactly those strangely shaped rooms.
Yes.
Right. So there's a triangle, a diamond, and a parallelogram, each with a different mystery associated with it that seem off with the the typical geometric, right angle sort of content sort of.
Absolutely.
But I mean, it's obviously not an accident that they house these supposed mysteries of the priesthood. With very specific things in the liturgy. The past, present, and future, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
It is strange though. And I know we've kind of touched on this before, like as I'm staring at this map and looking at these weird shapes and as David's saying, that the geometry of them doesn't seem to correlate with caverns and being underground and stuff. There's no evidence that these were ever surface buildings that were buried or anything like that. No. So it means that the Thothians, for whatever reason, have always been digging underground. And so I just basically, I'd really like to work out the timeline of the aliens to the early Thothians to the chasm to the late Thothians, where's the book that has all this stuff written down in it? Maybe we just found it. I'll never know. We left it behind. We're all going to die here, so we'll never see what's in that book.
Well, we certainly seem to be in the dying earth genre of campaign settings. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about this off camera and probably should have thought to save it for now, and I can't remember all the things we said, but I'm not going to repeat this. It'll be a mystery forever. What instead I'll say is within the theme of generational, I mean, look, what does this tell me looking at this room alone, right? That you have multiple histories and cultures that are intersecting, or one culture that is evolving or changing or bifurcating over time, right? And you have cataclysmic events that fundamentally alter the way in which those people inhabit that space. And they all want to hide underground, and they all paint the ceiling with stars, and they also have Voyager discs they want to talk to the aliens with. So, I mean, whatever you can project into that, whether it's literally like a cyclical, modernity is reached and then everything gets destroyed and then they try to reach it again, or whether it's like literalized in that sort of like post-apocalyptic fantasy genre style of thing, or if it is simply some people want to hide from what's up there and some people like to talk to it. There's a lot of things that could correlate to that, but we do know that the most significant feature, as we've reiterated in almost every detox, of Arden is time. And not just the time it takes for us to die from poison, but the millennia that is imbued into the space itself as the most significant attribute of that space.
Yeah.
It's the only important attribute of the space.
As Ted said, like the quest to sort of piece together the rough timeline of these different civilizations and races is very it's a very worthwhile goal. You can probably get by without knowing it, but it would definitely be a huge boon to you to piece that together. And you guys are doing a really good job so far. Like, I don't think that with the information that you have on you, I don't think that I can recall that you've overlooked anything. So you should be confident in the fact that you're slowly doing the right thing. Don't you? I don't want you to feel like you're wandering.
Very, very
unfortunately. Yeah. Unfortunately, so slowly that I've forgotten anything that happened 2 years ago. So,
well, that's why we keep the shared notes.
Rewatching that y'all are doing is definitely valuable in that regard, because I have to really brush up on those early facts. But
you should probably keep like a separate section of the shared notes that's maybe just your notes on
history and stuff.
Just on the timeline of the overall millennia-long timeline of Arden Bool. As far as the reason for why at least they are Kantians or the Thoth priesthood, or I don't know. You might want to separate the Thoth priesthood versus the Arcantians, but whatever. They're both Arcantians. You have a fairly good idea of why they were underground. That's pretty well known amongst the legends in the Empire. That is one single thing. The reason they were there. That's arcanum. That's why that's why they're there. And that can only, and for whatever reason, that's only been able, or at least the largest deposits have only ever been found in this area. But that lines up with the Arcantians' desire for conquest and domination, and also the Thoth priesthood's association with their gods' portfolio that includes magic and mystery and things like that, which is exactly what arcanum is. Yeah, secrets, exactly. So it's not a mystery why the Thoth priesthood was like the dominant religion in Arden Bool, when there was actually I think 10 other gods, 10 or 12, I can't remember which.
Are you trying to imply that theocracy and the power that it holds tends to skew towards hegemonic control of
I make no judgments. I'm just saying that seems to be the case.
The dominant ideology of a space might be rationalized through a form of God King to enact weaponized. No, I'm kidding. But
you take that idea though, because we I don't know if we did this on camera or off camera. We were talking about like when the first Thothians came here, right? Let's imagine our timeline is aliens. There's a crash, and the question is whether the arcanum precedes them, or they brought it with them, or their crash creates it. But either way, there's arcanum and alien tech, and then the Thothians come, and initially they are very much believers and the mysteries, and it's a cult, right? And I think I made the comment that it was a cargo cult. They're like, there was arcanum here. How do we get more arcanum? We sing, we bring down lights down underground, we praise Thoth, right? And then, to your point, over time it becomes hegemonic and entrenched, and you've got 50 whatever number of priors buried in a secret room full of treasure, and like there's no sign of arcanum down here anymore over in this area. Like, we've only seen arcanum really near the God phone, I think, right? Isn't that the only place we found it?
Yeah, it was up on the baboon level, which is notably up from here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
It's a good point. You haven't actually found that much arcanum, for one thing. That's a good point.
Like 3 pieces or something.
Yeah. You haven't found any like natural nodes, for instance, right? Now, be aware too, like, yeah, you guys have done a lot of exploring, but very, very little of it has actually been like natural, right? The Druids retreat was natural, and that's like very near the surface.
Yeah.
That's so just keep it in mind.
But that is interesting. Like all of the times when we have been like touching natural caverns. I think the last time was south of that blue pillar room, right? When was it Upior who was searching around down there, right? And you found all kinds of like weird natural things, but it was really scary. You're all by yourself.
I suspect, based on who knows, but we think that the Blue Pillar Room is probably near to or literally the base of the plateau of Arden Bool because of the water systems and the speculation that we could escape through the lake, where the turtle was if they weren't there. And that I lost your train of thought. What I was going to say.
Well,
that's what's at the base of the chasm, I think, on some level. But like, sorry, John, go ahead.
Well, you might be confusing, I think, because the cult of Arden you have reason to believe is near the base, right? Because
We
of
had to
the
go up, right,
yeah, but
to get to blue.
the blue, yeah, it was higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm combining them two. I'm conflating the two. Although it is it's an ascension and then it's a descension again back into the cave systems, presumably.
Yeah,
Maybe to the troll caverns. I don't know. But
it's
the Cult of Arden is what I was talking about. What else was I going to say? Oh, I mean, this is a bit of a retread of what we were all talking about with themes, but yeah, I mean, you have like things like what you were saying off camera, Ted. The classic technology is indistinguishable from magic, sort of like trope. And you have all of these religious institutions, whether they be like early cults or like highly established, sort of hierarchies, institutions. And then you have as the whole sort of division on who's allowed to use magic, who's allowed to essentially execute divinity, like practice a form of, although they are segregated as concepts, I think in these cultures, the arcanum as the impetus for them being down here is sort of like the bridge, I think, between sort of like the clerical and the sort of like academic, and therefore like if we're talking about hegemony, right, controlling it via various languages is an interesting like political tool. I'm droning. I'm losing everyone. Okay. The point. I was just sorry. Go ahead.
The interesting thing about what you said though is ties into the uniqueness of the Thothian dogma itself. Is that they, as I was saying before, they conflate arcane and divine magic as one thing. It's all as holy, yes. Right? So as far as arcanum goes, it's like it's both intellectually interesting for them, but it's also something that they might probably have perceived as divine. So it makes it doubly worthwhile for Thothians in particular. But remember, Thothians were a small sect of Arcantian culture that was in here, right? Like yes. when for a while you guys were very interested in Marius Tricotor and the regalia, and all of that is very secular, right?
Still am. Oh, and that's
yes. Just be aware that there is like don't conflate Thoth with Arcantos. They were part of the larger empire, but they had a lot of influence on the culture, the Arcantian culture in Arden Bool.
Well, and what you hit on that I was meandering about, right, was that the secular and the divine are bridged by the resource.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And like you said, Thothian cult is more explicit about that, right? Than like the mage guilds, and I can't remember the terminology of like the magical schools, and then sort of like the rebellion, the Pelagia, and then the like the revolutionary leadership against gatekeeping that the Sordians, right? Like that's a very interesting secular event. Again, that's like motivated entirely about the sort of like divine ore that everyone is obsessed with.
Yeah.
So
it's cool because the Sordians were basically coming from a point like, hey, we need to divorce. It's basically like a separation of church and state. They were like, we need to separate magic from religion. It is a separate practice, and everyone who has the talent should be able to practice it. And that was the key division that caused the Civil War. Was that sort of ideal,
It's sort of like an Enlightenment or like Renaissance sort of like analogy there.
Very much like
that we're seeing. Yeah. More reason, since we're on this floor, to not forget the like crazy wizard's secret riddle chamber to the north that we never resolved. Because again, what are all the component parts on just this floor alone saying about all of these things colliding, right? We have a lot just sitting here.
And that's another room that's definitely post chasm.
Oh yeah.
Because it's off of the chasm, right?
Yeah, it's in the northern part. Yeah.
Interesting.
Another thing that kind of drop in there for you guys to think about, since you're kind of on that wavelength right now, is that you're assuming that it's very palimpsestuous. Is that a word? There's a
love it if it is. Hold on, let me look it up.
Well, Ted was talking about the palimpsest of the different sort of the different layering of architectures and cultures and stuff like that. The chronology of those cultures entering and leaving Arden Bool, but that also what's really cool though is, as you've already seen in some places, is that there is what do you call it? Cross points where it's not like there was the aliens and then the aliens ended it and then the Arcantians showed up and then they did their thing. You know, there is cross pollination, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
You know from certain things that you've seen, frescoes and idols and books that you've read, that there was contact between these different cultures at different points. And so you piecing together the chronology is important, obviously, but you have to ask yourselves these questions about how did these cultures influence each other as one was dying off and another one was becoming more dominant. You know, what did they take from each other? You know, like how did that shape and change the cultures? And it's a huge question, obviously, you know, and you're just sort of delving in a dungeon, but you know, these things can be pieced together.
Yeah. One thing that is really interesting, I think Mike brought it up, but it's fascinating to me, especially in this context, to think about whatever happened to introduce this concept of, you know, ghouls and, you know, the undead happening, because you can't have that as a regular thing going on.
Pretty weird,
right? Something had to shift. And you know, the place where we just were is, you know, not too far away from that weird evil obelisk room that we ran away from, which is, you know, kind of directly to the north, right? This is in that whole area where we went down the stairs and stuff, and where we found Laurel's stuff. But you know, it's fascinating to think that at some point there was some kind of event that corrupted these people, because you know, these were tombs. You don't put tombs in places where that's going to happen. That has to come later and then corrupt the things that are already in the tombs.
Yeah, I mean, like to I have a sincere and a joke. I'm gonna that's gonna land very flat. But one might say all of these ghouls are cold warriors.
and that's the end of the detox right there.
And you know, like John's comment about effectively the cultural exchange, which is intrinsic in everything we're perceiving, right? Overlap, you know, cross pollination, cross influence. And cross conflict, right? We're entering into this at a time in which it seems very charged with not great stuff, right? Like there's and like whether it was always that way or not, we don't know, right? We certainly can intuit, again, using the historical analog of Rome, that the legionnaires may have been a unifying force in a very militarized sense to all of these cultures coming in and stormtrooping them into order. And perhaps are good sources for, albeit biased, but good sources for written accounts of all these cultures, but not necessarily accurate accounts of the cultures. Which is to say that, like, anything that relates to the legionnaires and the Roman sort of figures, like Clementia's asylum and all that, probably is a source for us to find out about the frog people and all these other things, but through an incredibly biased lens, right? Like, I don't know. I'm trailing off again.
That's a good point too, though. Is like a lot of in fact, I think most of the written works that you've seen, I think all of them actually have been Arcantian, right?
Yes.
So
that's Empire.
You're definitely only getting a very biased, one-sided view of whatever you're reading, right? You know,
it's a product of Empire. Yeah, it's a unifying force via violence, clearly, but it's also why I have, perhaps unduly, but been generally suspicious of anyone who is like very loudly Roman in their regalia. You know what I mean? Like,
but it's like,
not that they're like evil, but it's just like, I know kind of how they operate. You know what I mean? Like,
that's exactly what it is. It's like beggars really can't be choosers, because it's like you yourselves are human, or, you know, sentient beings. And so, of course, who you're going to relate to and probably trust the most is the Arcantian word, right? Rather than something that you're going to find that was written by the Hoppers or something like, you know.
No, for sure.
To the point, though, about the cultural exchange, though, like one easy example to point out is the Tricotor's regalia, right? You have those names. The Iron Circlet of Gonor, the Bone Ring of Yagranaz, and the Ebon Spear all sound very, you know, magical, high fantasy sort of thing. But then the last one is interesting, right? It's called the Tablet, right?
I'm certain it's alien.
Yeah, and so, you know, so that kind of, you know, Ted, to your point, you know, you could probably kind of slot that in. Like, you know, Marius was part of the earliest conquest of Arden Vul, right? Like, you know, there's different levels of conquest too, right? Because so Marius came in prior to the Civil War. Obviously, the Civil War happened long after he was gone. But then there was also Adrianic's expedition. This was, you kind of were into this whole thing like a long time ago in our campaign. But that was Anaximander.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
right, that whole thing. There was an attempt only about 250 years ago for another reconquest that failed miserably.
I think that's the source of the Beastmen, personally.
I agree. I agree. 100%. I agree. Yeah.
Say nothing.
That tablet, I think when you mentioned the tablet, I think that was the first time we thought perhaps that the Arcantians had encountered the aliens. I think when you mentioned that, we all went, "Oh, it's an iPad. That's definitely alien." Like that was the first time that we.
Cool.
Because I think the first alien thing we encountered, there was like a broken down wall, right? Like as if it were hidden behind there, and maybe we were the first person ever to see it. So we sort of assumed that, but then we heard about the tablet, and we were like, "Oh, nope, they knew about the aliens for sure."
Yeah. So you're thinking along the right path, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Colin also, right? He knows very well, right? We haven't talked to him yet.
Yep.
And I would also, this is again, there's so much information to sort of like assemble in my feeble brain again, but it's just throwing spaghetti at the wall. I stick on the word conquest as the repeated futile attempt to control a situation via conquest, biting them in the ass over and over and over and over again. And yet you look at something like, the 12 Labors of Arden, and if the vision I got from that sword had any veracity, it wasn't the first one to go and help some goblins. A culture that is anathema to what we would assume, right, is interesting to or in agreement with the humans in this space, right? So, like, what different ideologies are at play here, and why is this like a fringe cult down in the basement when it would kind of appear it has a very Christ-like and more exchange than conquest attitude about things. We'll put it that way.
And that was very early too. That was the days of Arden, right? Who actually discovered Arden Vul in the first place. So long before the Arcantian conquest itself.
Yes.
Right.
So you talk about desecration, Matt, with ghouls or the beastmen. You know, I made the Shant mask. I'm fixated on that as like a concept there, right? Like those are like negative feedback, right, for potentially like negative action. I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, it's interesting. We got to figure out more about the 12 Labors. We got to go back, baby. We got to go back.
We have such a long list, man. There's so many cool things to do. How fun is this? Just like poking around and like connecting the dots. It's so fun, and yet we still have all these big things hanging overhead, and all of them are so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm dying to see if you go back to the halls of Arden and
that's number one for me, baby. I just gotta convince everyone else.
Well, no, you got the fire pit thing. Sorry, take it.
Oh, I'm so ready. I'm so ready.
I don't want to read too much into John. Like this is very meta, but like John made for this level a very big blank map and put us up in the corner. And if we take this piece of paper as any sort of guide to the size of this level, we got a lot of work to do.
I don't want to disagree with you, except for the fact that if that was to scale, I would pity Richard. What a torturous, even if it's brilliant, what a torturous process to do that large a level. Oh my God. Yeah. He's getting out of cat of nine tails and flagellating his back via design.
Oh my God. Think about it. Or he spent the whole time right at his desk with his quill and his parchment, drawing his map and going.
It turns out Jacobus dying at the door of his own tomb was just Richard, planting himself in the setting.
It'd be interesting to find out. I suppose I could probably ask him on the Facebook page, but how much he. I mean, I know that the cartographer was Andreas Claren, and he does an amazing job in the published work. But I don't know how much he was actually working off of what I assume would be Richard's like handwritten
sketches or something.
Yeah, I don't like. I'm just not sure how much of it is the brainchild of Richard and how much of it is Andreas's. But
John,
I'm just scrolling through the maps and I'm like, Jesus, mother of God, it's something.
Ask him to get some, just like post some little picture of like one piece of graph paper, right? Just like one little area that we've been in with his little pencil marks.
With his notes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this about the level that you're on right now. It's definitely one of the larger levels. So
I gathered as much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and we know just from what we've heard, right? We know that there's these huge areas to the south, right? What they've talked about. Caverns. We know the fungal caverns are down there. We don't know how far that extends, but we think it's huge. And then, that whole area to the west, right now it's full of undead, which is, I think, a kind of a bonus to us right now, because that's a buffer protecting us from whoever else is farther west, right? Who might want to come through will be turned away by the undead that are out that way. But still, man, there's so much. And then, so there's the southeast, which is going to be the fungal caverns, and that southwest is who knows what's down out that way, right? Once we dig through the rubble or fight the setites and the zombies, and we need to get started earlier or play later.
Yeah,
Ted, drink more coffee.
Come on, man.
We need to do like $100 level Patreon so that we everyone who's already pay that amount, and then we can play full time.
Just so we can play 4 hours.
Yeah.
No, it's the truth. Well, I remember I can't recall who, because I was kind of a ghost on Discord this week. Well, at least relative to how I usually am. But someone made the like boring a hole, drilling straight through the dungeon remark. And I thought it was funny and brilliant, because I just want to get some TNT down here and just start blasting.
If you have the means, I'm not going to stop you. There are spells. There are spells like pass wall, move earth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff.
Transmute rock to mud. A lot of stuff.
There's probably a tomahawk missile on at least one of those ships if we go back and grab one.
Hell yeah!
We'll blast a hole in the side of this place. Okay.
Yeah. Think of how many cleric spells there are that we can blow up.
There you go. I mean, I think we should ritually burn them all as sort of like a devotional. I love
We should probably stop this, but I just want to leave it on just a real quick note. Like, I want to make sure that you guys are. I know, like, the completionist thing of like filling out a level is like extremely desirable. Like, it's very satisfying to do that, but it's a fool's errand with this for this particular adventure. You're never gonna be completely satisfied. Just so I would drop that as a goal.
Not a goal,
which is an important one, because I don't want to draw this out, but because like part of our discussion has been securing the debouchement, and whether mapping the debouchement before doing that is even feasible is perhaps not the case.
Well, I'm saying what you have done for mapping of the debouchement is substantial and very, very well done.
Sure.
There, it was just funny to me, like the immediate adjoining rooms off the debouche had never been entered prior to a couple episodes before.
And so there was such cool stuff in there.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. And there are still some nooks and crannies in this general area that that you're working on right now to fill in, which are definitely worthwhile. But I'm just saying, don't limit yourselves to the debouche level forever, because there's enough there that could be a campaign in itself, right?
Of course, and I would just like not to beat a dead horse on the cult of Arden, but if this is a temples district at the entrance of a city showing all the different cultures that exist in it, and all the other floors are a deeper dive into each. Not that that's the case, right? Then this is like a surface engagement with the larger sort of like institutions that might be deeper, right? And if we can shortcut to those, it might be worth shortcutting to them, in the sense that we were able to with Arden.
Yeah, you've already been doing a great job doing those shortcuts. So
and troll lifts, baby, troll lifts. Like, that's the thing that I'm super excited about whenever we can get to it, because that's the one thing that I really feel like that clock is ticking on, is engaging in some way to decide through that, to go after the rod and decide what we're going to do there. Are we going to bolster the king? Are we going to overthrow the king and put Mort up there? Are we going to side with the black snots? We don't know, but I think we got to engage with that, or the clock's just going to tick and it's going to go on without us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you got a lot
I
of
would
options,
like to-
and you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, at some point, Mort will hit he'll top out levels as a goblin. That's when you install him as king, and then John takes him as the new king as an NPC.
Yeah.
And so we'll just do that.
Noted.
That's my plan.
Sure. Yeah.
Noted. There you
Sure
go.
thing.
Okay.
Got it.
I still last thing I'll say, I still deeply, even if it's just the death of me, want to jump into that chasm. It is, you can't have a giant chasm and not jump in it, guys. That is the biggest crime we will execute in this campaign, is if we finish it and we've never jumped in the chasm. I will stitch together 30 bed sheets and make a parachute if I have to.
This is why you need to jump. You need to get into like creating magic items or spells or scrolls. Like make your own featherfall. Make your own
I will
featherfall.
make featherfall.
Yeah.
Yes, immediately.
That's what the shrine can do now, man.
Or fly.
We got to right. That the shrine's there for a reason.
We could float down like Sardaukar all the way down the chasm.
I'm going to create
you sold me right there.
There you go. I'm going to create like a bubbly poultice and call it there's no good joke there. Soda. And we'll float down.
Nice.